Right. All right. Welcome to the Automotive Blockchain channel, everyone. Today we have a special guest from the company of IoTeX. And for those of you that don't know who IoTeX is, IoTeX has started their journey to build the Internet of Trusted Things. And I'm really excited to bring on to this channel today the head of business development, Mr. Larry Pang. Larry, welcome to the Automotive Blockchain channel, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. Glad to talk about all things IoTeX and how blockchain is really impacting both the automotive space from the vehicle standpoint and from the sales standpoint and just everything in between. We'll cover it all.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hey, you know what? Before we get into the tech stuff, one of the things I always say at the beginning of my channels, I just started doing it recently, but I really do appreciate all of the, the subscribers and people reviewing it. And I just kind of send a love out to everyone that's viewing this. Continue to do your research. Please do. This is not a financial advice type channel. This is one of those places where you can come, do your research about the various technologies and really educate yourself. But that said, Larry, the reason why I'm glad to have you on is because for me, and the way that I produce this channel, it's about real life utility. And part of that behind that technology is also the people. So I want just break it down and tell the people a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Los Angeles, born and raised there. And, I think that was a really great experience, right? You kind of isolated, but then I got to go to college on the East Coast and spend my first 3 to 5 years on my first job in New York and Boston. So I went to MIT and went into consulting right after school. They say, consulting is what you do when you don't know what you want to do. So that was very much me, but I think it was perfect because it was almost like a grad school for me, but more from a business standpoint, right? Because I stayed there for about 5 years, kind of tried to get, a master's PhD in business on the ground. And I think my consulting career really helped me shape what I wanted to do in the future, which was design more things, right? Be more strategic about designing new ways the world can work. Yeah. And that's exactly what I do here at IoTeX. I joined about 2.5 years ago. And it's been such a journey, man. I think jumping into the blockchain industry, outside looking in, it's chaotic and it's, sometimes doesn't make sense, but you start to appreciate those things because you realize you're kind of connecting the dots on dots that haven't been connected before, and there's going to be volatility everywhere, right? So now at IoTeX, we're working on a lot of really cool smart devices with both device manufacturers, chip manufacturers, and kind of application builders to tie it all together. And I'd love to chat more about what we have going on at IoTeX, but that's just a little bit about me.
Cool. You're not going to escape your LinkedIn profile, Larry. I'm just here to tell you. I know it says you were the varsity team, tennis team's captain for varsity at MIT. So, I have to ask a couple of questions on that because, like I said, it's about the love dub, about people getting to know the company. And, so
absolutely.
How fast was your serve? Let's just tell everybody, how fast was your serve?
Man, people look at me. I'm like about 145 pounds, skinny Asian kid, but I can serve it about 120, 125,
You're like a Michael Chang.
Yeah. No,
he was one of my favorites.
I played tennis maybe every single day, 2 hours a day for my entire life, right? From the time I was 8 to the time I was 18. And I can't say it was for the love. I would say that, kids growing up playing sports, it's more about teaching them about competition. And if they end up being really good at one of them, then you think, oh, I can get my kid into college this way or help him get into college this way. For me, tennis was very much about getting into college, but it's so funny how it works when you get into college tennis, then it's not the golf claps anymore. It's like, it's college guys screaming right when you're serving. And, I always imagine what tennis would be like if there were no silence rules, right? Similarly to these clubs back here, if everyone could be yelling when you were swinging your golf clubs. But I've taken more of a liking to, basketball and golf, but that's just, I think, just trying new things, not getting much better at tennis these days, but as we all know, that sport will make your head spin as far as improving.
A tennis swing is not good for a golf swing at all.
yeah. And a squash swing and all these things I'm learning. But I think the point about making contact, like I can grab a baseball bat and smack a baseball. But yeah, it's about applying things you thought you knew, but in a different format, right? With golf and tennis and squash and all these other racket contact sports. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I bring that up because it really has to do with, what you take from, you were a team captain. So that says that you achieved at a height for that team, the highest you could pretty much
Hmm.
go other than be the coach. And it shows that you had the discipline in there, and clearly you carried it on in your professional career, and now you're here. And that said, when I think about what you've done in your past, and now I have to ask the question too, is what about the company culture then? Because, you know, like I said before, a lot of people talk about the technology and, get into the common jargon, but the
Hmm.
people at the company, you have a lot of geniuses over there. Is there
Hmm.
anyone that stands out as being like that person there on the calls? There's always the goofball, or they're always the one that bring the fun in. What's the company culture like over there at IoTeX?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're a work hard, play hard type of company, right? But
Mhm.
for the past 2.5 years, we started in about 2017, right? And steadily have been growing the team ever since. Maybe I could just provide like a background on the founders, which kind of
Yeah.
trickles down through the organizations that they kind of head up, right? So three co-founders, one of them is named Rowland Chai. He PhD in cryptography and used to work at Oracle, Google, and Uber, leading large teams building cryptography platforms, cloud platforms, things like that.
Hmm.
So really knows everything about the large scale infrastructure and the cryptographic side, which we all know is super important in
Yeah.
blockchain and all technologies that require encryption today. The other one is Kevin Guo. He was a early employee at Facebook. I think he joined around 2011,
Oh
2012.
wow. Yeah, that is early.
So yeah, he was really early helping to build a lot of the ads products out there. Um, and that kind of is the product mindset, right? Around driving not only new releases, but frequent updates and figuring out what users really want.
Hmm.
And finally, the last co-founder, her name is Jing Sun, and she comes from the VC world, the venture capital world. She's be a managing partner at Sparkling Capital, where they're doing a lot of investments in AI, cybersecurity, IoT, and
Okay.
blockchain. And if you think about the functions of those, one is kind of leading the kind of the deep tech, back end tech. One is more the front end user facing tech. One is more on the investments and ecosystem side. And I think my role here is, I bring a lot of operational expertise from my time in consulting. Consulting is all about, you literally go on the ground with the clients for maybe 3 months,
Hmm.
download from a fire hose everything about their business and figure out how to fix it, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's making strategic recommendations or actually executing the work out in a
Yes.
separate phase, right?
Yeah.
So that part of it, I think, has allowed me to view the current state things and just always question like what's wrong with this, how can it be improved. So across all those different pillars, there's a lot of other amazing geniuses, like you were saying, leading a lot of teams at IoTeX. So it's just really cool to see how that all trickles down. But we like to have fun. Going back to your question about culture, I think everyone takes this blockchain space so seriously these days that
Yeah.
it's almost fun to joke about how serious everyone is taking it. But we know everyone is dead serious in this industry, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just thinking about competition and all these things day over day sometimes numbs your mind a bit. So we try to stay away from that. We're not the type to really shill unnecessarily. Whenever we launch a product, it's already out. It's not really necessarily like just an announcement. So that's a big part of our culture too, is bringing a little bit of truth to what we're building in this industry. I think that's a big part of IoTeX culture.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So, well, let's dive into it then. So, for those of you that are really tuning in for the first time into this technology, and you're really dialing in because you're interested in the automotive side of it all, we are going to get into that. But let's start with some of the basics, Larry. So, Larry, go ahead and define what the Internet of Things are from IoTeX eyes.
Yeah. So IoTeX, we're a smart contract blockchain platform, but built completely from scratch to cater to the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is this phenomenon where all these different smart devices that are connected to the internet, gathering data about our daily lives, helping us to optimize that, our workflows, our businesses, our daily lives, all of those devices out there, about 25 billion today. And that number is going to grow to anywhere between 50 to 75 billion just in the next 5 years by 2025, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge number of devices. It's almost hard to think about. It's like almost 5 devices per every person. But the number really pales in comparison to the amount of data that these devices are generating, right?
Very true.
So when you think about it from a data perspective, about 80 zettabytes of data, and one zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. So 80 trillion gigabytes are going to be generated by IoT devices. And a lot of that's going to be coming from vehicles. As we all know, vehicles are basically driving computers with, upwards of 30 ECUs these days, constantly streaming data, even have hard drives in the back to store it all. And if you think about it, who owns this 80 trillion gigabytes of data? Today, we're talking about the tech oligopolies, the cloud providers, even the device manufacturers, right? But our thesis is going to be, in the next 5 years, as that data grows, not only will the consumer and small to medium business interest in owning that data, whether it's for control or monetary or just privacy concerns, the desire to hold one's data is going to be exponentially higher for this side. And on the other side, regulation is going to make it untenable for corporations to want to even hold their users' data, right? It's going to become a liability instead of an asset to hold users' data in the future, right? Yeah. So given that understanding of the world and our belief in how the world is going to be trending, what do we need to do to bridge that future gap, right? And I think inserting an unbiased third party, which could be a blockchain or a smart contract or an application that's verifiable in between these people that, want to deliver services on top of users' data, but don't want to own that data, and the users that are expecting the same level of service as well as owning their data. How do we facilitate that with technology, right? And that's what IoTeX is really all about, is connecting these dots, these future dots that we really envision, right? So we start at the very foundational level, right? For us to build a trusted ecosystem, the real foundation for us is those devices that will generate that data, right? So devices like UCAM and Pebble Tracker, the reason why we say, IoTeX is a legit project is because we don't have to fake products anymore, right? We have real smart devices running on our platform today.
Well, I definitely want to get into those in a little bit because I got a little funny story behind the UCAM that I'll share with everybody in a little bit, but wonderful technology. So when we think about then about the technology that you have, and one quick note then on for everyone that's listening and watching with respect to the Internet of Things that Larry kind of hinted towards is that 80 billion that he's talking about, you have no idea how many of those you interact with on a day-to-day basis, passively or directly. And that could be from traffic lights to the sensors that are in the water filtration system in your city, all that sort of stuff that have these little sensors. So definitely go, just a kind of a plug for IoTeX. Larry's done a number of different videos on that, but a little plug for you, Larry. I know you've done a lot of video at Reimagine 2020. Definitely go check out that video because he goes through and explains a lot of that on there. And I'll put a link in the description for everybody if they can go check you out on there for your presentation. So with respect to IoTeX and the actual technology, first, we'll get to some differentiators, and I want to kind of get rid of the big elephant in the room for the people who are like, wait a minute, all I know is Bitcoin, man. All I know is Ethereum, man. So how is IoTeX, specifically as it pertains to Bitcoin, different than Bitcoin?
Yeah, let's peel back the onion there. So as Bitcoin reaches its 3-year all-time high as we speak, it's worth noting that, there's a lot of different definitions of what blockchain and cryptocurrency mean today, right? Depending on how deep and educated you are about it. I think that the general consensus about Bitcoin is that, it's magical internet money. And honestly, it's very hard to educate brand new people about it unless, you have some assumed trust, right? I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin. I'm just putting it out there. But introducing people to this concept, this beauty of blockchain through magical internet money often is not the best way to do it, right? So to break down what blockchain is and what, kind of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is, blockchain is technology that powers Bitcoin, right? It's basically a distributed database that's collectively maintained instead of maintained by any single entity, right? If you think about all the different hacks that happen today, a lot of that is just due to the fact that, one person sits in the middle. It's like a single point of failure. All our data is decrypted on that database. And blockchain really flips that model in a way that is pseudonymous by nature. But the more important thing is no single person owns and operates this infrastructure. And blockchain is just a tool, right? I think that a lot of people think about it as the panacea. This thing is going to solve all the different problems in the world. But blockchain, to me, is great to like as mentioned, insert as a unbiased third party in places where another intermediary may just be untrusted or is clipping too many fees, right? A lot of the functions of these intermediary businesses, whether they're data aggregators or data distributors or data analyzers, a lot of that can be automated away and verifiably done by technology today, right? So we have to question, what is the role of physical intermediaries in the future versus digital intermediaries? You know, we're not going to replace, I think one big example of this is in the automotive insurance industry, right? Yeah. Are we going to get to the point where we're going to completely replace the claims and underwriting process? Probably not, right? But the information that we're delivering in an unbiased and trustworthy way is really going to inform all of that decision making regarding who's at fault for an accident, what your insurance claim should be, and things like that, right? But just to go back to the blockchain part of it, people need to understand this. This is just one layer of technology of IoTeX platform in order to achieve these claims that we make, right? Around, you are the only one that has access to your information. If you want to send it or sell it, it's completely up to you. So that's kind of the principles we apply as far as the design of IoTeX goes.
Okay. Now, and you know, and that's, I appreciate you saying that. It's one of those things where I've found that people are so focused on what the media is actually talking about, which is the big elephant in the room for now. And that is Bitcoin. And I'm a fan of Bitcoin. I do get it, but I'm also a fan of these other, you know, as they say, the altcoins that are out there. And just so you can let everybody know, go ahead and give everybody, you know, the IoTeX symbol. So that if they did want to go ahead and look it up, get an idea.
Yeah.
I know where you're at already today. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's just IoTeX, and it's available on Binance and things like that. And, you know, just to give people that are new, so that's a blockchain side. Like, blockchain is this infrastructure we talked about. These tokens, these cryptocurrencies we're talking about are just kind of digital standards that are deployed on top of these infrastructures that nobody necessarily owns, right? So it's, again, collectively maintained, collectively trusted. It's very community-based. And even though you don't know who these community members are by name, it's still assumed and baked into the blockchain that all of the transactions you have are trusted, right? So yeah, I think IoTeX has its own cryptocurrency as kind of the fuel to just lubricate the incentive model, right? Blockchain is all about, not just about technology, but also about encoding economics into that technology. So that's where the currency side comes from as well.
Okay. And now I know there's a bunch of viewers that are going to be asking this question, and I know you've fielded it before, but I want you to field this question again. What are the big differences between you and that other company called IOTA? Because there use case wise, there are some differences, and go ahead and explain that to everybody.
Yeah, you know, we get this question a lot, right? And I think it's natural to compare. You know, I think, you know, very clearly IOTA is #1 in market cap in this blockchain and IoT sector. I think we're #2, right? So we begin getting a lot of comparisons, but at the end of the day, like, what we're doing is very different, right? The first thing is that they use a different type of technology, right? It's one that is more still research, still being researched. It's called direct acyclic graph, DAG. And it's different. It's still a type of distributed ledger, meaning everyone is still collectively maintained by a community, but it doesn't have the qualities of a blockchain, where, you know, a lot of people are used to the Ethereum model of gas and things like that. It's not really applying to IOTA there, right? They're trying to create a machine-to-machine protocol that allows value transfer from the last time I've seen, right? We are thinking about more of like an expressive ecosystem of devices, right? I think that as far as having machines pay each other, it's very important, but I think the ability for, you know, machines to digest new information and make decisions and all these other things are also very important. So I don't like to talk about IOTA and IoTeX too much, but everyone has to understand that everyone has their own kind of roadmap, and everyone has their own kind of, exactly.
So listen, everyone, you know, there's a lot of comparisons out there. I've seen it on the web, but the key thing is that, you know, as Larry mentioned, there are 80 billion, right? You know, pretty much 80 billion things out there. And the space is going to be filled with a lot of different companies that are coming into it. But here's the thing, IoTeX is definitely a unique entity emerging in this industry. And we're going to get a little bit into kind of like, I mean, this past summer, let's just get into it. You had a lot of great announcements this past great summer with respects to your mainnet technology. You want to kind of briefly get into that a little bit, just so everyone knows. And as we get into that, we'll start bridging in some automotive factors on how automotive can work with that. So
Perfect.
talk about the summer with the mainnet, buddy.
Yeah. So for the past 2 years, we've been building this kind of open source platform protocol, right? And we just launched the production version of it in June of this year. It was called Mainnet GA, which is a really big deal, right? I think the activation of live economics on the network and having, basically delivering the ability for the network to manage itself, right? We as the core team, we're the core contributors to the IoTeX platform, but we're not the single owners, right? There is no single owner of IoTeX. So what Mainnet represented was kind of taking it out of the sandbox and putting it into the real world and letting it kind of expand and grow naturally through the community, right? So that's one really exciting part. But the other exciting part about what Mainnet represented is it means that our platform is ready for developers and newcomers to start building on it. And I mentioned the devices that we're starting to be powering on IoTeX. It's really laying the foundation for a lot of cool stuff. And I'll explain a little bit in the automotive sense, right? But this is one of a really important product for us. It's called UCAM. Yes. It's a consumer-facing security camera, but it's completely private. And it's really interesting the way we use blockchain in this device, again, as a tool, not as the only thing, right? So a lot of people ask, you guys are throwing blockchain on a camera, it's gimmicky, it's marketing, but it's not, right? We have a white paper you can read about IoTeX and UCAM specifically. And basically what we do is we take blockchain as the login mechanism. As we all know, the private keys, public private keys of a blockchain address are self-generated. And that means that you exclusively own it, right? So what we do is we take that private key and we use to end-to-end encrypt your information. So we also do all the computing on the camera itself. So there's no centralized servers at play. So it's a combination of blockchain, end-to-end encryption, and edge computing, which really makes us able to make these claims that you are the only one that will ever be able to own your videos. And what you do after that is up to you.
So question about that. I understand that because you're mentioning this, and I think we're going to get into the hardware side of this in a couple seconds here. But I was talking to another company that I have to keep nameless that works with the government. And they were essentially utilizing hardware in order to, build pipelines for information. So essentially, you're saying that when you're saying end to end, is it kind of like a skiff on one end and a skiff on the other, and then it gets decrypted on either end? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand, the difference between end-to-end encryption and what's called client-to-server encryption, right? So client-to-server encryption is actually, what most of the traditional internet runs on, right? It's the point where, say that you have your device, you have your phone, and there's something in the middle, right? A lot of people today will host their customers' information on a centralized server where all of that information is decrypted, and it's really the root of all hacks and
mother of all hacks with our data, right? A thumb drive and a happy person.
Right. So end-to-end encryption is where in between your phone and your camera, everything there's no point at which your data is ever decrypted. So the only place with UCAM your videos are ever decrypted is on your UCAM device or your phone. There's no centralized server that hosts that at all, right? For the client to server model, what happens is there's kind of a hop in between here where everything's encrypted from your phone to the server, but it's decrypted in the server. They run some business processes on top of that. They also run some behind the scenes weird stuff that we don't know about. And then they re-encrypt it and then send it to the thing. So it's end-to-end encrypted for everyone else except the oligopoly and the tech giant.
The intermediary in the middle.
You got to ask, what are we really giving up under that type of architecture, right? So what our architecture is take all of the, and this is really a big trend about what blockchain and this concept of edge computing represent, right? It's take the responsibilities of this centralized server and distribute it to trusted
Yeah.
nodes that will do exactly the same thing,
Yeah.
right? So I mentioned this whole thing about inserting unbiased third parties through technology. This is a real world example of exactly how we do that, right? With UCAM. So
So with
again,
that UCAM, the funny thing is, I was looking into that a couple of months ago,
mhm,
and I was searching, internet cameras and stuff for my house, and
mhm,
I was like, okay, and I came across it, and I was like, this is interesting. And here's the thing: I had not heard of IoTeX at this point in time.
mhm,
So I'm only looking at UCAM, and then I saw IoTeX, so I started researching about you on that, and then I saw a
mhm,
couple of your things on YouTube. Amazing technology. As
mhm.
far as automotive goes, when I look at that camera, you know where
Yeah,
I'm going with this. I'm thinking
dash cams. Yeah,
dash cams, not
yeah,
cameras that are on the rear facing, front facing cameras, maybe not with the lidar or the radar, that kind of intensity,
hmm,
but it could go there. But at
hmm.
least with dash cams, have you guys entertained that thought process at all? For because a lot of accidents and insurance claims evolve out of that.
Right.
Talk to me about that. What do you guys think about that?
We think very highly of that, right? I think, so this, just a little bit more background on this, right? We did not develop this hardware. IoTeX is a technology platform, right? We do have a lot of expertise in IoT and hardware, but it's more to create like prototyping boards like this, which I
Yeah.
will talk about later, right? But this is a consumer facing product, right? So we partnered with this security camera manufacturer called Tenvis, and they've sold millions of cameras to governments, to enterprise, to consumers
Mm-hmm.
since 2005, right? Been around for almost 15 years now. And the good thing is the technology and the architecture we built into this hardware is kind of like a shell for our technology to operate in. The good thing is, you can easily fit this into a form factor of an outdoor camera,
Yep.
a dash camera, a doorbell camera.
Mm-hmm.
The camera industry is already $250 billion worldwide, right? So I don't think even like a lot of the cars out there are equipped with cameras today. And that's kind of scary. That's kind of strange to think about, right? Because the reason why people put security cameras in their home are, from our experience, either to talk to their pets, or monitor
That's
their
the baby.
pets, or, when they're out,
Yeah.
yeah, pets or baby, or elderly caretaker type of thing,
Yeah.
or when they're out, they want some type of insurance. If they get robbed, they can have it on video, right?
Exactly.
And if you think about the places we spend the most time in today, it's probably the home and our cars, right? And also the most valuable assets we have. So why, if we can put a $20 to $30 device in our homes that can also guarantee our privacy,
Yeah.
then why not have that information that
Yeah. Very
that
true.
we own?
Very
The
true.
danger with a lot of people, I think, that they don't want to put these cameras out there is they know that the footage is going to one of these intermediaries first, right? But
Mhm.
if you can tell them, no one is going to see this information if you don't want them to. It's fully up to you. This data is your property, right? No one else owns your property. We have a weird like property ownership model today where a lot of the things that we think we own are actually owned
No.
by Google. We're
Yeah.
just kind of renting it, right? So
Yeah. Let me
that's where
break
I
that
see it in the
down.
automotive space, though. Yeah.
Yeah, let me break that down. So for everyone listening, there's different levels of technology that people understand as they're listening to this video. It's kind of like this. So let's say, for instance, you go to a restaurant and you have your identity on your credit card. And then that intermediary is that waiter, waitress person who you give your identity to in hopes that by the time they get to that little machine and they do a swipe that they haven't did the whole pencil cover over the top of your credit card number, written everything down, and then they bring
Mm-hmm.
your ID back to you. That person, that intermediary, that waiter, waitress person, that is what he's talking about. Are those big oligarch type companies who will literally take that data and do whatever they want with it. And as you've seen with the number of hacks that have gone out there, and I won't mention any companies directly, but everyone knows they've been hacked. I've been hacked. Had identity issues with a number of different companies for the cards that I have over the past 10
Mm-hmm.
years. And it's never a good experience. So what
Yeah.
Larry is talking about is what the price of that is what, 40 for $50? You can
Right.
have end-to-end encryption of your video camera, of your lifestyle, of your complete identity, of whatever it is that you're trying to watch and protect. So
Yeah.
no more of, and I mentioned baby cams because a few years ago, there was, people would have certain cameras that would watch their children, and someone from the outside would hack into the system in your house and literally
Mm-hmm.
watch everything you're doing in there.
Yeah.
So, which is a huge security risk, for anybody, that's your home. This
Mm-hmm.
literally stops that, in my opinion.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that Larry's talking about with that. And I want to break it down, just say, look, it's that real. You would never want to have your credit card given out there. And that's why in this wonderful world we're living in now, where you can just walk up and just do a little swipe. You don't have to hand your card over to anybody, grab your phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect that way. So,
Yeah.
so that is that. Now, going a little bit further, then one of the ways that another way that I got introduced to IoTeX was I had already known of WiseKey in the automotive industry. I was very familiar with what Daimler had been doing with the PKI in the vehicles. So it was one of those things where I was like, holy, you guys are huge. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys are now working with WiseKey, with that level of integration, and a little bit towards the automotive industry and how you see that benefiting.
Yeah. So just to start with the second question, right? We'll jump into WiseKey in a bit. I think cars today are like driving computers, right? Like we think about all the different devices that we own that generate a lot of data. Of course, our phones, of course, our laptops, but cars today, if you have any Wi-Fi in your car, I think your audience will understand, there's a lot of different ECUs in these cars with everything that knows whether your seatbelt's on, whether your airbag's deployed, the speed, everything, right?
Yeah. They're literally things that we sit in and go around. That's what cars are.
Right, exactly. So if you think about that, today, there's a lot of companies that would buy that information. Say that you drove the same route every day for a year and collect information from 9 a.m. to 9:30 about a strip of the 110 freeway in LA. You can't tell me that's not valuable. Maybe not to the tunes of millions of dollars, but Postmates, DoorDash, Uber, Lyft, public utilities, kind of urban planners, they're all dying for this information, right? And it's just like there's a very big gap between the public and private partnership to understand traffic data and understand data in general, right? So think about like this, right? This is a device, it's called Pebble Tracker. It does things like GPS location, temperature, humidity, air quality, motion, vibration, lights, right? It's a prototyping board that we designed for blockchain and IoT developers to give them every metric that they would want outside of video, right? So the two combinations really give you a full 360 picture of your environment, right? And a lot of people, I think, are stuck on, okay, I get it, we can own this data, but what are we actually going to use it for, right? I think we haven't even been able to fathom or tap into what's the economies of scale we're going to get when we combine private data from the Google, Apple, Facebooks, et cetera, government data, where they're sitting on things like traffic patterns and weather and soil levels and soil moisture, and finally consumers, which are all of our day-to-day activities. When we have that holy trinity of data all coming together, all verifiable and all able to be intersected, then this is kind of the AI explosion, I think, that is the only way that we're going to counter China as far as their progress in AI goes, right?
You mentioned something. Do you mind if I interject for a second there?
Of course.
So with these sensors, and I know a lot of the technicians and the people, the manufacturer people that listen to this channel, they understand the amount of sensors in vehicles. But the average consumer out there, listen closely to this. So when you get in your car and then you have you set your put your particular settings in. All of the manufacturers, and I mean all of the manufacturers, they are literally developing, infotainment systems that are connected over the air a number of different ways that will monitor all things going on in the car, from your emotions to whether you're sleeping. And then, anyone, please, I'm not pitching any particular company one way or the other, but go check out any of the new videos on the 2021 Mercedes-Benz S-Class that is just released with their infotainment system. It is insane on what they have in there.
Yeah.
So, and I mentioned that with respect to, because WiseKey is some of that technology that's built in there for that vehicle. But that said, though, you mentioned the sensors on the inside. Please keep in mind, people, that the data that's associated with that, meaning the temperature of the vehicle, the temperature of the vehicle and how you're keeping it warm, cold, or hot, it can all memorize that. And from what I understand and what you're saying, then with that device that you have, you can literally in a car, if that Pebble was inside of a car, it could record all that data and provide great information back of climate control, et cetera, and be able to remember those settings for later. Is that kind of what you're saying there with that?
It is, and for those that are in the automotive space, like the timeline to add new OEM hardware into a vehicle is like 6-7 years, right? So there's a lot of people thinking in the third party space about, again, how do we insert unbiased third-party devices into vehicles, right?
Mhm.
You know, for the camera, we talked a lot about, you know, recording potential accidents and seeing who's at fault, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure if anyone listening has gotten into an accident. I got hit by like a scoot, like a scooter or rent a scooter. And it's been maybe 2 years now. I haven't gotten anything back. Like paid my deductible. It's just like, you know, it's one of those situations that I didn't have a video of that incident. And because of that, I'm stuck in this long cycle of arbitration and things like that. But if I had like a dash cam and caught that, then it would be indisputable, right? The other thing that's really interesting is like we talk about pointing cameras to the outside world. What about pointing cameras to the inside? So, you know, you're talking about trucking companies. We went to CES this year to really kind of launch this product. And a lot of people came up to us. Yeah, a lot of people came up to us, especially from like, you know, big automotive companies. They're always scanning like consumer tech, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of them said they are developing technologies to evaluate the mood of their drivers. Yeah. Not just to like sleepy or not sleepy, but happy, sad. Yep. You know, I think this is will never fly in the States, but in other countries, they're looking pretty closely into it, right? So we have to think if we have that information, right? If I installed a camera inside of my car pointing outside and inside, what could I use that for, right? If I have the information from my ECUs that a sudden thing hit me, you know, to your point, you know, everything in the car is going to be memorized, right? But if we can, you know, use time as use a timestamp and figure out what exactly else happened at that time, then you can piece together your own story and you can settle your own insurance disputes, right? Why do we need to have 6 to 12 month long arbitration processes for something that's so obvious to us, right? We just need to have that information, right? I wasn't asleep and I have a video of you hitting me. You know, my eyes were focused on the road. What else is disputable about this claim, right? So yeah, especially in the commercial space too. I think it's going to be a big concept. It's just, we have to get comfortable with the fact that we will own our data and we don't have to give that to anybody, right? Even if we own data that incriminates ourselves, we don't have to share that, right? So that's the big thing.
Yeah. Unless we're ordered to by some form of law. And that's the thing, because the power still is within our hands, and that's okay.
And even in that case, you could say, take me to jail. I'm not going to give you my data, right? Yeah. That's fully into your choice. And I think that's very important too, right?
Yeah. I like that. I like that. So now another thing with that Pebble Tracker, I like that thing a lot as I was learning about it. And, you know, when I apply that thing, I mean, how big is that? I mean, it's like really just
my iPhone's pretty big, but it's kind of like it's like an AirPods case size, I would say.
Oh wow, okay. So literally, that's you know, and listen, everyone. I know in the market right now, there's this thing that's been out for about 10 years maybe 7 years called Tile. You know, this is like Tile with a Superman cape on its back, and it's flat. You know, it's not remotely the same thing. For some of you that may be thinking that way, this is a lot more robust. So if you think of Tile, okay, I get it, but put a little like X-Men thing on its chest and a Superman cape, and that's really what this is. Would that be a fair assessment if you want to break it down that simple?
I think so. You know, just to break down, you know, I think it's worth mentioning like the anatomy of IoT devices, how they're different, right? So let's compare Tile with Pebble Tracker. Tile is Bluetooth based. That's first of all, right? So let's take a step back. IoT anatomy, right? Everything has some sensors to measure some physical phenomena and convert it into digital data. It has some type of battery or power supply. It has some type of connectivity to the internet, whether it is directly through Wi-Fi or cellular, or it connects to a Wi-Fi or cellular device through Bluetooth or low power, long range, a lot of different hops you can create, right? And it has some type of compute memory and storage, right? Depending on how valuable the device is, that the price is going to be increasing there, right? So Tile is a Bluetooth device. You have to be within 10 meters of your phone, let's say, for it to register, right? A lot of people are trying to create like Bluetooth mesh networks, which mean if you're in an area that's so dense and there's a tile that's 15 meters next to your tile and there's a phone within 15 meters of that tile, then you can make the hops and connect to the internet, right? But if you're talking about like commercial use cases where you're driving through middle America, there's no tiles within
that's like
many
a dead
miles.
zone in the cell tower. It's not going to work.
Exactly. So what this device does is it replaces Bluetooth. It has cellular. So just like you pop in a SIM card into anything, any type of phone, you pop it's called a narrowband IoT or LTE-M SIM card, and it will give you a signal anywhere there's reliable or like a decent cell signal, right?
Okay. And is that I know, for people that are understanding cell phones, they may be thinking, is it CDMA? Is it which one is it? They may be thinking that. Which could you kind of just break that down a little bit, just so they understand the cellular side? Because Sprint's like CDMA and Verizon or CDMA, but
I'm not familiar with the CDMA terminology, but I think a lot of people are wondering about like what this 5G thing is all about, right? And I think that 4G is already very fast, right? It probably gives us up to 100 megabytes download speed. Don't quote me on that, but the 5G side of things is it's a different type of connectivity, right? Just like cellular connectivity or IoT connectivity is different than normal cellular connectivity. 5G uses kind of multiple input, multiple output model, right? And it's on a very shorter frequency, which means that you can pump a lot more information through, but that frequency is much more prone to break, which is why it can't travel through walls, right? A lot of people are only finding 5G in random street corners of a city. But if you think about that concept about like 5G being a really cool hotspot to just walk in this zone, it's almost like very ready player one, right? I'm going to hop into this circle and download everything. And then when I leave this circle, I can't download at the same rate, right? But the going back to the devices side, right? I think the cellular reach of this device is something that's really attractive to people, right? Because they want to be tracking things 24/7, not only when it's within connectivity. And anyone that's using Apple Watch in the gym knows exactly what I'm talking about here, right? Can't find the signal, can't listen to anything.
Very true.
So thinking about equipping this thing with its own reliable connectivity is one thing, but also the sensors we throw into this is another thing. But the real big important thing is we've added a piece of secure hardware into this. Secure hardware is like that chip in your iPhone that manages all of your sensitive information, your passwords, your Face ID, your fingerprints. And it's basically an uncrackable part of your device. The most reliable part of your device is that. So we've applied this to make this almost like an ultra secure asset tracking prototyping board for enterprises that we're working with today. So
that's a good point. So I want to start wrapping this thing up by talking, diving in a little bit deeper onto the automotive side, and that is the supply chain security. So I say many times in my videos that to the listeners that listen, the automotive industry is so siloed with all of the suppliers that go to from the cobalt that are going to be for the batteries and things that aren't cobalt, down to all of the individual accessories, parts, et cetera, that go into manufacturing the vehicle. And in some cases, manufacturers can have 30,000 different suppliers in the chain. So when I think of this Pebble Tracker and I think of IoTeX in general, to me personally, I don't speak for any entity or anything like that. I just think you guys have a technology that could actually help the automotive industry out with helping consolidate those silos down and transfer that data from one entity to the other. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's a really good point. And that's actually something that we're working on with WiseKey that you mentioned, right? So our partnership with WiseKey is about combining secure hardware and blockchain to provide verifiable information for things like supply chain transactions, right? So in the supply chain today, I really agree that there's a lot of opacity, non-transparency that is creating massive bottlenecks, right? But I think we got to ask ourselves, do people really do the oligopolies that control the supply chains want this non-transparency? And I think the answer is yes, because that makes them more money, right? It's the same thing with elections, right? Like why do people desire non-transparency? Because they hold more power when there's less information out there, right? Not to sound too pessimistic about the world, but this is the way capitalism operates in a lot of ways, right? Holding the information means you hold the control. So democratizing that information really allows small to medium businesses to operate more in supply chains. You mentioned those 30,000 suppliers of a Walmart or something. Walmart's getting to the point where they're requiring their suppliers to provide more and more and more information. Like we see that Walmart putting lettuce traceability on the blockchain thing as something that's very innovative, but they're not using a public blockchain. They're using a permission blockchain that's owned by them. And they're using blockchain as a framework, almost like as an intake framework or intake template. You have to give me this information proactively, or else you cannot be my supplier, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
So
Very true.
thinking about it from like recreating that from a bottoms up perspective, right? If we had devices that can more reliably tell us where our shipments are when they're reaching warehouses, then we can not only lubricate the entire supply chain and make it, reduce all the bottlenecks with more information,
Yeah.
but we can also bring more players into this, right? The other part about supply chain is the financing side, right? Taking this product to market, we start to realize that, a lot of these small to medium businesses, I totally understand why they go on Shark Tank now. Like the terms that these distributors give you are ridiculous, right? They're going to pay you in like 365 days from the moment they sell the first camera. So blockchain and the cryptocurrency side of it, using verifiable, trusted information to then pay people earlier and lubricating your supply chains will ultimately diversify global operations. But again, have to understand that there's powers that be that don't want this to change. And sometimes it's not the technological side, right? It's more about the business side and encouraging, finding consortiums of people that believe the same thing is going to be the next big thing for blockchain.
And that's what automotive industry manufacturers are doing. They're developing, being part of consortiums. They understand that that transferring the data from one entity to another is important, especially if it's in their own vertical of supply chains. The stacks of paper, if anyone understood the stacks of paper and documentation, literally paper, not just Excel spreadsheets that exist in one supply chain that go from literally the boat to the shore and all throughout it's insane. It can be sometimes 2 feet high. And a lot of people don't understand that. So that being said, when we look at, the products that you've had, such as the Pebble, and even in my opinion, the UCAM, obviously maybe with a different design, you could put it into a vehicle. I really see the technology, the products that IoTeX is developing, as well as the infrastructure behind it with this release of the new mainnet is going to be phenomenal.
I'm really curious to see how I'm really curious to see how the industry reacts to this, right? Just like if you're talking, like one thing I'm really interested to understand is if we bring this user-owned video, users only exclusively own this video, we bring that to like a AAA or like an insurance company, right? How are they going to view that? Are they going to be like, okay, like I want to, I'm going to value this and I'm going to, have a all-state safe driver's check every time you submit new information proving you're a better driver, you're being more safe, right? Or are they going to be skeptical about it and it's going to take another 5 years before we see this into the large big box? So that's what I'm looking out for. And I'm sure we're all paying attention to the adoption of this stuff.
Yes, definitely so. So, hey, Larry, it's been great having you on, and I would love the opportunity to have you on again. I still have a bunch more questions as it pertains to the automotive industry and artificial intelligence on how these things relate to what you have there.
Absolutely.
Because that's a whole nother deep in dive of a conversation. But any last words you want to say to people in the automotive industry about IoTeX?
Yeah, I think, IoTeX is really one of the unique projects in the space that I think is not trying to work on short-term things. We're, even since we started in 2017, we've always had the kind of the vision for the intersection of blockchain, IoT, and privacy, which is, our version of kind of this own your data ecosystem to really enable people and small to medium businesses to really take back control and have a say in this kind of this world, right? I think there's a lot of people that are very tribal, like you have to go all in or not all in. Not really, I think that, the tribalism, viewing blockchain as a tool and one layer of the tech stack, like I don't see people talking about AI or 5G the way they talk about blockchain. And I think that's the way blockchain has been marketed, right? Blockchain has a real potential along with AI and 5G and edge computing, confidential computing to really transform a lot of the way that our business models operate. But if you don't want to live in a society where you have to own your data and it's very user-centric, you enjoy the life you live today, you don't have to live it, right? That's the beauty of it. I don't think we're overtaking the normal world. We're creating a side ecosystem of passionate people that want to own their privacy, want to own their data. And if that's interesting to you, get in touch with us, try out some of our products. and we're really just getting started here. But next time we'll talk all about automotive kind of department sales. Recalls is really big for
there's a
blockchain.
lot to go
A
into. I
lot of
have a whole
stuff.
list of notes, and but I want everyone to get a good introduction to who IoTeX was, a little bit about your background, you personally, your company culture, because that's really what's important is the power and the culture of the people that drive great products. That, to me, that's really where the story is where the people are at. So, hey, Larry, thank you very much for coming on to the Automotive Blockchain channel, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. We'll check in next time.
Yep.